If you listen long enough and close enough, if you stayed long enough and you listen close enough, you could feel the ground shifting beneath you, because that wasn't just about a man who died. This was about a movement claiming divine permission to rule. Can I get a witness?
Believe it or not, Donald Lemon is absolutely right. Of course, he is trying to diminish it. Donnie is trying to spread his misery. But there was one thing that he said where Donald Lemon was absolutely right. You could feel the proverbial ground shifting on Sunday. Hell, you could feel the ground shifting the past 2 weeks. Obviously, Sunday was all about honoring Charlie Kirk. But one of the best ways to honor Charlie Kirk is to fulfill his legacy. And Donald Lemon is right. This is a revival. This is about a movement. This is about normal people taking back the country. And that's what has deacons at Woke United Methodist shook. That's why the deacons are terrified. And it's damn sure why we see deacons like Keith Olbermann, KDP, lashing out on social media. 15 or so years ago, a young woman from Riverside, California began her professional MMA career. Hey guys, it's me, Ronda Rousey! She started off in Strikeforce before it was purchased by the UFC and Dana White. She quickly made a name for herself by submitting her opponents in 1 or 2 minutes or less. By the time she arrived in UFC in late 2012, Ronda Rousey was already a star. 2 years later, Dana White had turned Ronda Rousey into a megastar. 11 of her first 12 fights ended in the first round, with most of them ending in less than a minute. Going into her fight against Holly Holm in November of 2015, Ronda Rousey was the heavy favorite. Odds makers in Vegas had her at minus 1,200, which means you had to risk $1,200 just to win $100. At this point of her career, Ronda Rousey was undefeated. As a professional fighter, she was 12-0. But those who followed MMA closely, hardcore fans of the UFC, they were skeptical of Ronda Rousey and her undefeated streak. Now you got to remember, Ronda Rousey came along during the genesis of women in UFC. Matter of fact, she was the first women's champion, and she didn't even have to fight to win the belt because Dana White just gave it to her. The reason MMA experts were skeptical, they didn't feel like Ronda Rousey had beaten experienced fighters, quality opponents. Outside of Miesha Tate, most of her opponents were green. Of course, Dana White didn't care because Ronda Rousey was a massive draw on pay-per-view. Ronda Rousey had something that you can't teach. She had something that is damn near impossible to develop. Ronda Rousey had mystique. Opponents were intimidated by her. She became this mythical force until she stepped into the octagon with Holly Holm. Within the span of about 6 minutes, the mystique of Ronda Rousey evaporated. That night in November of 2015, Ronda Rousey didn't just lose a fight. She didn't just lose a title. Ronda Rousey lost her mystique. She lost what made her special. She had one more fight in the UFC in December of 2016, got her ass kicked by Amanda Nunes, and Ronda Rousey never fought in the UFC again. Once your mystique is lost, once people know that you can be defeated, you can never get it back. From 2020 to 2024, there was a similar mystique with deacons at Woke United Methodist. Seemingly overnight, the country changed. All of a sudden, dudes with beards were dominating women's sports. Minorities were viewed as the ultimate victims of an oppressive system plagued by mythical racism. It seemed like the entire country was infected with a severe case of stage 4 OMB. Orange Man bad! More importantly, this mystique it intimidated normal people into silence. I'm sure at one point the deacons thought they had won. I'm sure at one point doctors at Woke Memorial Hospital thought they had perfectly administered the woke fungus. But then the Trumper won the 2024 election. But that's okay. The deacons could turn that temporary loss into a reason for outrage and terrorize normal people with riots while calling them peaceful protests. But then they took it too far. Tyler Robinson took the life of the one man who was willing to speak to him. Tyler Robinson took the life of the one man who was willing to tolerate him. To make matters worse, parishioners at Woke United Methodist, they celebrated Charlie Kirk's death. The problem is, the celebrations opened the eyes of normal people. The celebrations brought on the one thing that the deacons know. They know will eradicate the woke fungus. Out of those evil celebrations came a spiritual revival. As a result of the spiritual revival, we are starting to see the deacons, lose control. We're starting to see them lashing out in uncontrollable anger, which is exactly what happened last night when Keith Olbermann threatened the life of the American hero. Make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Link to the second channel in the description below. Earlier today on the second channel, talked about Daddy Dion unintentionally damaging the reputation of his baby boy. According to Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders was telling certain NFL teams during the draft that he didn't want to play for him. This kid who didn't have a job, this kid who was potentially going undrafted, he had the audacity to tell NFL teams that he had no interest in playing for him. I'll give you the details, so click the link in the description below, subscribe to the second channel. Last night, the American hero Scott Jennings, I am a real American. Last night, the American hero, he was surrounded by the usual paid propagandists at CNN, and he was trying to speak truth about Jim Kimmel. I'm sure most at CNN are mourning the career of their pretend friend Jim. This is so sad. ABC agreed to give Jim his job back, but these miserable affiliates are refusing to broadcast his late night dump. I hate this country. Ah! I'm sure Scott Jennings was trying to explain that normal people had absolutely no interest in seeing Jim Kimmel return to television. Matter of fact, most normal people want Jim Kimmel to get off my TV. Whatever truth the American hero said, it caused an allergic reaction with Keith Olbermann. Last night, Keithy was sitting on his Pink Panther with his favorite cat, Tudor. Keithy and Tudor were watching CNN, and Keithy experienced a severe reaction to the truth from Scott Jennings. I'm sure Tudor was expecting Keithy to head to the litter box and relieve himself of this rage, but instead, Keithy picked up his pink phone and immediately released his outrage on social media. Check it out for yourself. You're next, motherfucker! I hate you! Obviously, this is typical behavior from Keith Olbermann, but in this new political climate where maniacs are taking the lives of normal people over words, over ideas, Scott Jennings decided to take the threat seriously, and he reported Keith Olbermann to the FBI. Scott Jennings was not the only one who reported Keithy to the authorities. Countless people on Twitter took the threat seriously, and they defended the life of the American hero by reporting Keithy to the FBI. Apparently, having the FBI potentially launch an investigation into his lunacy, that was enough to spook Keith Olbermann. This morning, Keithy did something that I have never seen him do. He apologized to Scott Jennings for being a maniacal asshole. Check it out for yourself. Scotty, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't send me to prison, Scotty. They don't offer preparation H through commissary, and I'll have no way to soothe my Bruce caboose. Please forgive me, Scott Jennings. I love you. In fairness to Keith Olbermann, even though I don't think he deserves fairness. But in fairness to Pooh, before he threatened Scott Jennings, he was talking about removing fascists from TV. Now, of course, this was kind of a weird threat since most of the real fascists are his former colleagues in the mainstream media. But Keithy was talking about removing normal people from TV who he mistakenly refers to as fascist. Now, do I think Keith Olbermann was intending to threaten the life of Scott Jennings? If this were someone like Jimmy Kimmel, if this were someone like John Oliver, the answer to that question would be an obvious no. But with Keith Olbermann, I really don't know. Because this dude has been out of his mind for years. How am I supposed to know? Hell, how is anyone supposed to know? Keith Olbermann has been unhinged for years. This dude is so radical, he was kicked out of the mainstream media. They won't even allow him at MSNBC. My inside sources tell me that MSNBC has a restraining order against Keith Olbermann. Wouldn't surprise me if every woman in America has a restraining order against this deranged doofus. Like I said, if this were Jimmy Kimmel, I would not think that he was threatening the life of Scott Jennings. But Keith Olbermann? This is what happens when you have lost your mind. This is what happens when you're constantly displaying erratic behavior on social media. You say something like this, and no one can defend you because there is no defending the indefensible. To my knowledge, I have not seen one person in the media come to the defense of Keith Olbermann. I'm normally all about free speech, but I am tired of defending the rights of people who won't defend mine. The FBI can decide whether this was a credible threat or not, but if I'm Elon Musk, I am banning Keith Olbermann from my platform. At minimum, I am suspending his account. And it's not because I think Keith Olbermann is a physical threat to Scott Jennings' life. It's because one of his lonely male followers could be. There is no more tolerance with shit like this. I'm tired of being told that we have to share society with people who belong in a padded room. You cannot convince me that Keith Olbermann isn't insane. I don't blame Scott Jennings for reporting him to the FBI, and I guarantee you, that is the only reason Keith Olbermann deleted those tweets and decided to apologize. Sound off in the comments below. I'll see you guys tomorrow.